I still remember standing outside that shiny glass building holding my apron in one hand and a cold coffee in the other. It was late afternoon, and the city sun reflected off the tall windows like mirrors. People walked past me dressed in suits, heels clicking against the pavement, not knowing I was standing there quietly trying not to cry. Inside, my entire family was laughing, clapping, and raising champagne glasses for my brother's big moment. They'd all shown up for his company's launch. My dad wore his favorite gray suit, the one he never even wore to my graduation. My mom had her hair done, red lipstick, and that proud look on her face, the kind I never got to see pointed at me. My aunts and uncles were there too, snapping pictures like it was a wedding. My brother stood in the center of it all, cutting a giant red ribbon while balloons floated around him. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even mentioned. They called me just a server. They joked behind my back that I was still carrying trays while my brother was carrying the family legacy. Maybe I was. At least for now. But what they didn't know, what none of them had even bothered to ask, was that I was building something too. Quietly. With tired hands and sleepless nights. Something they would all see soon. Something much, much bigger. And I didn't need balloons for that. It had always been like that in our house. My brother was the golden child. From the time we were little, everything he did was praised, framed, and celebrated. When he brought home a drawing from kindergarten, my parents stuck it on the fridge like it belonged in a museum. When I brought home one, my mom smiled politely and told me not to waste paper. They said he was the smart one, and I was emotional and too sensitive. I remember sitting at the dinner table trying to explain how I wanted to start my own little business one day. Maybe something online, something that helped small shops. Dad chuckled, took a bite of his food and said, "That's sweet, but your brother's got the real brain for that kind of thing." My mom added, "You're more of a helper, honey. Be realistic." My brother got everything handed to him. New books, new laptops, summer tech camps, private tutors. Dad used to say, "You have to invest in talent." Meanwhile, I had to borrow his used textbooks and find ways to stretch my lunch money. In high school, I worked weekends at a diner just to save up for things I needed. My parents didn't even ask where I went. They assumed I was just being dramatic and doing too much again. The hardest part wasn't even the money. It was sitting at that table every night hearing them brag about him while I cleared the plates. He would talk about coding projects or new business ideas, and they'd nod along like he was already a CEO. If I tried to speak, I'd get a half-hearted, "That's nice, dear," or worse, they'd interrupt and shift the topic back to him. That kind of favoritism doesn't just fade away. It sinks into your skin. It whispers to you late at night that you're not enough, that no matter how hard you work, you'll always be second place in your own home. And yet I kept smiling. I kept showing up. Even when they made me feel invisible, I stayed visible to myself. Because deep down I knew something they didn't. They had built my brother's dream for him. But I was going to build mine all on my own. I still remember the day I first told my parents I wanted to start a tech business. I was 16, sitting on the edge of the couch with my notebook full of scribbled ideas. I'd been watching videos about e-commerce and small software tools for independent stores, and I thought, what if I could create something that helped people like me? People who didn't have a big budget but had big hopes. My mom laughed. Not the soft, encouraging kind. It was that sharp little laugh she did when she thought something was silly. "You're not business material," she said, waving her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "You're too soft. You get tired just walking to the mailbox." Dad didn't even look up from his phone. "Leave that kind of stuff to your brother," he muttered. "You're better off with a steady job. Maybe a receptionist or something like that." So I stopped bringing it up. But I didn't stop dreaming. I got a job waitressing at a local diner after school. The shifts were long, the pay wasn't great, and I came home every night with sore feet and greasy clothes. But I didn't complain. I saved every tip. I skipped buying new clothes, didn't go out with friends, and poured everything into a small savings jar I kept hidden in the back of my closet. Eventually, I bought a used laptop. It had a cracked corner and missing keys, but it turned on, and that was enough for me. I found online tech courses that ran in the evenings and took them while the rest of the house was asleep. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the dark, headphones on, learning everything from scratch. Coding, marketing, basic accounting. I soaked it all in like my life depended on it. Meanwhile, my brother, he didn't have to do any of that. At 22, he told my parents he had a vision, and within weeks, they handed him a $100,000 check to follow his dream. He got a brand new office space downtown, hired staff, even bought one of those fancy espresso machines for his team. My dad gave a toast that night. To the future CEO of this family. I wasn't invited to that dinner either. But while they were toasting his dream, I was quietly building mine. With second-hand tools, long hours, and no safety net. What they didn't realize was that every sacrifice I made was laying the foundation for something far stronger than money. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was building something that would last. The day of my brother's big launch party started like any other for me. I was folding napkins at the diner, prepping for the dinner shift, when I got a notification on my phone. A photo. Then another. Then dozens. Balloons. Champagne. Laughter. My brother stood in front of a shiny new sign that read HarperTech Solutions. Innovating tomorrow. He wore a sharp black suit and had that smug grin that always made my stomach turn. My parents were next to him, beaming like they'd just watched him win an Oscar. Mom was in a new blue dress. Dad had his favorite cufflinks on. A big crowd surrounded them, clapping, posing for photos, glasses raised high. Everyone looked perfect. Except for me. I wasn't invited. Not even told. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through picture after picture. My cousins were there. My uncles, aunts, even neighbors I barely remembered. It was like the entire family had come together for him, and somehow forgotten I existed. I felt a strange mix of sadness and something sharper. Something like anger. I told my manager I had a family thing, and left mid-shift. I didn't even change. I took the bus straight to the address I'd seen on the invitations posted online. My black and white waitress uniform felt like a spotlight as I stepped into the building. Everyone turned. Their eyes scanned me like I was lost. My heels clicked awkwardly on the tile floor as I walked deeper into the room. The music, the laughter, the smell of catered hors d'oeuvres. It all felt so far from my world. I spotted my brother holding court near the champagne fountain, shaking hands, smiling wide. Then I saw her. My mother. She caught sight of me across the room and raised an eyebrow like I was a stain on her perfect evening. She walked over slowly, her wine glass dangling from 2 fingers. Then she leaned in, smiling for appearances, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. At least serve with a smile, sweetheart. My cheeks burned. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Not a word. Just silence. I turned and left. Walked all the way to the nearest bus stop without even looking back. That night I didn't cry. Not this time. I just sat on my bed, took off my shoes, and pulled my laptop into my lap. The same old one with the missing keys. And I kept working. Coding, planning, learning. Because while they celebrated his party, I was preparing for my breakthrough. They gave him a party full of guests, music, and praise. I was building a future they couldn't even imagine. After that night, something inside me changed. The humiliation didn't break me, it fueled me. Every time I remembered my mother's smirk or the way people stared at my uniform, I used it as fuel. I stopped looking at their lives and focused on mine. I knew if I wanted to be taken seriously, I had to build something undeniable. So I got to work. I kept my job at the diner, pulling double shifts when needed. But every night, without fail, I'd come home, make a cup of instant coffee, and sit at my small kitchen table with that beat-up laptop. I gave up sleep, weekends, even holidays. While others went to parties or vacations, I stayed home, typing, learning, building. I started with an idea. Simple but useful. I noticed that many local businesses in my neighborhood struggled with managing online orders and customer feedback. Most of them still took orders by phone or pen and paper. I thought, what if there was a simple platform to help them organize everything digitally without expensive software or tech knowledge? So I began developing a basic app, something small business owners could use easily. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it worked. At first, it was just me testing it with the owner of the laundromat next to my apartment. Then a baker across the street heard about it and wanted in. Word spread slowly but surely. Shopkeepers began recommending it to one another, and I could see downloads ticking up, one by one. One day, a customer at the diner overheard me talking about the app. He asked a few questions, then handed me his card. Turns out he was a retired tech investor who now mentored young developers. I thought he was joking, but a week later he showed up again and asked to see a demo. He saw something in me. Not just potential, grit. He didn't offer money. He offered guidance. helped me clean up the app interface, refine the backend, and introduced me to tools I couldn't afford before. Under his guidance, the app grew stronger, more polished. I wasn't making millions, but I was making progress. One store at a time, one recommendation at a time. And while my brother was busy throwing parties and updating his LinkedIn with buzzwords, I was quietly building a product people actually needed. No champagne, no balloons. Just code, coffee, and unstoppable drive. While I was spending every spare moment grinding in silence, my brother's company was making a lot of noise, for all the wrong reasons. At first it looked like he had it all. Flashy ads, a high-end office, expensive consultants, and a whole team of people in suits who looked like they knew what they were doing. But beneath the surface, things weren't quite right. The product they launched, it was flashy, yes, but it didn't solve any real problem. It looked good on a screen, but it was complicated to use, didn't integrate with anything small businesses actually needed, and worst of all, it crashed. A lot. I saw it all unfold from a distance. The first round of reviews came in and they weren't kind. Words like overpriced, buggy, and pointless started appearing on forums and review sites. One local shopkeeper even told me, "Your brother's app gave me a headache. I'd rather just use a notebook." That one made me smile a little. Still, Dad kept pouring money in. I overheard through family whispers that he'd written another check, something close to 50 grand, to keep things afloat. My brother brushed it off, blaming the market, the users, the bad timing. Never once did he blame himself. But things got worse. Staff began leaving. There were rumors of unpaid invoices, office rent falling behind, and vendors refusing to work with him again. My parents stayed quiet about it, pretending like nothing was happening. But I knew. The shine was fading. Desperate to save face, my brother tried rebranding the whole thing. New name, new logo, a new mission statement that sounded like it had been copied from a business podcast. He even hired a PR firm to write him a redemption story. But deep down he knew. The product didn't work. It had no heart. No vision. No audience. He started looking for outside investors, quietly. People he once laughed at for being too small or too local. But the startup world isn't kind to noise without value. His name didn't carry weight anymore. And without Dad's wallet behind him, doors started closing fast. I remember seeing one of his desperate LinkedIn posts. Some overly confident pitch begging for seed funding. It had a dozen likes, most from family. And I thought he really believed that money and parties would build a business. But real business, real success, that comes from solving problems. From sweat. From nights spent working when nobody's watching. And unlike him, I had all of that. While he was rebranding failure, I was getting ready to introduce something real to the world. Something that didn't need balloons or champagne, just results. By the time my brother's company was sinking deeper into trouble, my little app had quietly started to gain real attention. What began as a small tool for neighborhood shops had grown into something bigger. Something investors started noticing. It wasn't flashy or loud, but it was solid. Practical. Helping real people with real problems. That was its strength. Slowly I formed a company around it. I hired a few trusted people. Developers who shared my vision, marketers who believed in the product. We worked quietly, focusing on improving the app and expanding its reach to more businesses in nearby towns and cities. No big launch parties. No expensive offices. Just steady, honest work. Then one afternoon I got a call from one of the investors I'd been speaking with. A respected angel investor with a sharp eye for promising startups. They wanted to introduce me to a new contact who was looking to invest in local tech businesses. I didn't know it then, but that contact was connected to my brother's failing company. A few weeks later, my brother's team reached out to my investor, asking for funding. They had no idea who I was or what I was building. They just saw an opportunity for money. The day of the pitch, I walked into the meeting room quietly, my heart steady. My brother's face when he saw me dropped. The same boy who once smirked at me for being just a waitress looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't smile. I didn't mock. I simply took my seat and listened. As he stumbled through his presentation talking about rebranding, pivoting, and new market strategies, I could see the cracks in his confidence. The desperation behind his words was clear. It was nothing like the quiet determination I'd felt in my own work. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and shared the story of my app. How it started with a simple idea to help struggling businesses, how we grew step by step, focusing on results instead of noise. I showed real numbers, real users, and real feedback from customers who relied on our platform daily. The room changed. Investors leaned in. They asked questions I could answer without hesitation. I wasn't just pitching a product. I was telling a story of grit, hard work, and real impact. After the meeting, my brother tried to approach me privately. I saw the mix of regret and fear in his eyes, but I stayed composed. The power had shifted. From that moment on, I wasn't just the girl who served coffee and cleaned tables. I was an investor, a leader, and a force to be reckoned with. My brother's world, once so bright with balloons and celebrations, was fading into the background. Meanwhile, I was building something lasting, something real. And this time I held the cards. The moment the power shifted, I knew I had a chance to do something bigger. Not just for myself but for the family that had ignored me for so long. My brother's company was sinking fast. Investors were backing away, bills were piling up, and the flashy launch parties were nothing but distant memories. One day I made a bold move. I offered to buy his failing startup. Not for millions, not for some grand figure, but for pennies. It was a deal that shocked everyone. My brother looked like I had slapped him, and my parents' faces twisted with disbelief and worry. "Why would you do this?" Dad asked, voice sharp but hiding fear. "Because I want to save what can be saved," I said calmly. "And maybe teach some lessons along the way." They were desperate. They knew the company couldn't survive without fresh cash and better management. So they accepted. Taking control was both satisfying and challenging. I didn't want to tear the company down entirely. Some parts had potential, some teams were good but poorly managed. So I kept what worked but restructured everything else. I hired new people, experts who knew how to build sustainable tech, marketers who understood the audience, and financial advisors who made sure we stayed on track. I demanded professionalism and dedication. No more parties, no more empty promises. My brother, who once had the world handed to him on a silver platter, now worked under my company's name. It was a role reversal that never stopped giving me a quiet sense of satisfaction. I never gloated to him, but the shift was clear. This smart one was now working for the girl they called just a waitress. My parents acted like they were proud. Fake smiles at family gatherings, polite mentions of my success. But I kept my distance. Their approval wasn't something I needed anymore. I had learned the hard way that real respect comes from actions, not words. Months passed and the company slowly turned around. The app improved, user numbers grew, and profits started trickling in. I didn't just save a sinking ship, I built a better one. One evening, I found myself standing outside the same shiny glass building where I had once watched my family celebrate my brother's launch party. But this time, everything was different. I walked inside with confidence, greeted by employees who respected me and investors who believed in the vision. I was no longer the outsider. I was at the top. And as I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline, I felt a deep sense of peace and victory. No balloons. No champagne. Just the quiet strength of hard work and true success. That's the moment I realized. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in words or anger, but in rising above it all and claiming your place at the top. They gave him balloons. Bright, shiny balloons floating in the air, symbols of celebration and success. They gave him all their love, their trust, and their money. They wrapped him in pride and applause. Every smile at his launch party was for him. Every cheer was his. I watched it all from the sidelines, wearing my dirty apron, carrying a tray filled with cold coffee and silent disappointment. All I got was silence. The kind of silence that hurts more than words ever could. Rejection that cuts deep but teaches you something important. That sometimes the people closest to you don't see your worth right away. They only see what fits their idea of success. They called me just a waitress, as if my dreams didn't matter, as if my hard work was invisible. But sometimes that silence, that rejection becomes your fuel. It sharpens your focus. It pushes you to work harder, to prove not to them but to yourself what you are really capable of. Because you know deep down success isn't given, it's earned. It's built in the quiet hours, in the unseen moments when nobody's watching. I carried that apron for years. I wore it like armor, reminding myself that this was just the beginning. While they celebrated with balloons and speeches, I was busy building something real, brick by brick, code by code. I stayed up late, learned everything I could, and kept my eyes on the prize. I wasn't just chasing a dream, I was creating a future. My brother had investors once. He had his big moment, the money and the fame. But without a strong foundation, all of that can slip away like sand through fingers. His company fell apart because he didn't have what I had: determination, humility, and a willingness to fight in silence. Well, I am the investor. I am the one who believes in new ideas, who funds real change, and who builds businesses that last. The same people who doubted me now come to me for support. The girl with the dirty apron is gone, replaced by a woman who stands tall and commands respect. This journey wasn't just about business or money. It was about reclaiming my worth, proving to myself that I am more than what others see or say. It was about turning pain into power, silence into success. So when I look back, I don't feel bitterness or anger. I feel pride, quiet, steady pride, because I know that sometimes the greatest victories come not from loud celebrations, but from the strength to keep going when no one is watching. And that's my story. The story of how rejection became my greatest motivation, and how a dirty apron led me to build an empire.